Today we have the pleasure to present ABMC's Vanishing Treasures project related to the First and Second World Wars. So here are the three speakers for today, but I'm going to move on to the summary of this webinar. So I'm going to cut off my camera just for the record and to think that it would be more appropriate. So at the beginning, I'm going to present the speakers, and first of all, it's going to be the presentation by the ABMC of the Vanishing Treasures project. Secondly, lessons learned from the field. So it's going to be History Associates Incorporated. It's going to present how they envisioned and they provided help and support to the ABMC during this crucial phase of the project. And then finally, Arkhênum is going to present how we manage multiple formats digitization campaign. And in the end, of course, we'll have a Q&A time if you have questions, and hopefully we'll have some or even plenty. So right now the speakers are Charlotte Meunier from the American Battle Monuments Commission. So she's a museum curator in charge of the preservation of the collection. She's based in Paris, France, because it's the regional office for ABMC, but she'll talk more into details into that. Laura Starr, here, from History Associates Incorporated, is the Senior Manager and Business Developer Manager for HAI in regards with this project. And finally, I'm the Marketing Manager for the Arkhênum company. So I'm going to leave the floor to Charlotte Meunier, and maybe she's going to keep her camera on, and you should be able to see maybe only a small part of that. So I'll leave you with that, and good luck, Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this presentation. I'm really happy to present you with this fascinating project that is Vanishing Treasure. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the agency before starting going a little bit deeper in the project context. Great. So the American Battle Monuments Commission, or ABMC, is an agency that was created in 1923. And we are maintaining and operating the Americans' overseas commemorative cemeteries and memorials. So that represent 26 cemeteries and 32 memorials that are distributed over 70 foreign countries. We are also, as Emmanuel mentioned it, we have one office in Paris, and we also have an office in Arlington in the United States, and we are all working together to maintain and commemorate the battles and to make sure that the cemeteries are open and welcoming visitors. So that's just a brief presentation of the agency. So as I was saying, the agency was created in 1926, and I'm currently working in a department that's called Collections, and they used to be called Collections and Preservation. And this department was created in 2016. So as you can calculate pretty easily, there is quite of a gap between the creation of the agency and the first cemetery and the creation of this department. So there was a lot to do and a lot of catch up to do. So we decided to create this department and to work on different projects to make sure that all the historic items, collection and documents were in good hands, and to make sure that we will be able to maintain the heritage of the ABMC. So it's really important for you to understand today how we work. We have, as I said, 26 sites, and each of these sites is managed by a superintendent, and these superintendents are in position for a different period of time. They can be working in a site for a year, maybe 5 years, sometimes 10 years, and then they move to other sites or they retire. So we have a lot of different management style, and we have different approach to historic collection. And this is why we needed to create a department, a collection department, to create some kind of unity and to uniformize the policies around the collections. And this is why we decided to work all together to maintain this collection. It's also explained why we have such a difference in the collections. For example, in some sites we have a lot of visitor register pages and they are all well maintained. In some other sites we have a lot of planting plans but no visitor register pages, because it depends on how the sites evolved. It depends on how the decision were taken at that moment, and this is why again we needed to have like a unity around this kind of decision. It is also important to understand that the collection, that what today we are calling historic documents and collection, when they were created, were just tools. When you are building a cemetery and you're using some drawings of the building, you are drawing some planting plans. For you at the moment, they are just tools. But now today, 50 years later, they are for us, historians, a very precious tools to document the history of the site and document the history of the agency. And this is why it was very important for us to identify this document as treasure. And when we started to go on site and to talk with the staff, we discovered that these treasures were kind of endangered by their current situation, and this is why we decided to call this project the Vanishing Treasure, because we acknowledge the fact that they were disappearing, they were not in good condition, and we needed to do something about it. I have just here a few pictures just for you to see what kind of example we were facing. So we have either appropriate furniture to store the plant, as you can see in this green map cabinet, but it's not necessarily in the perfect room. It might be stored with other objects that are not historic. So this might be creating some issues in the conservation. You can see on the picture in the middle that sometimes the documents are stacked together in drawers that are not necessarily able to close, so it's not ideal. Or you can see on the right of the screen that you have some rolled documents that are not easy to unroll and to preserve. So this is kind of some example of the issue we were facing, and we needed to do something that was really important about that. I think I forgot to mention that to give you an idea about the documents we are working with, and I'm sure that Emmanuel and Laura will go a little bit more in detail with that, but we have mostly building plans and planting plans. We also have some picture of the site's evolution. We have a lot of reports, HR documents, we have drawings, and we also have some brochure and documents that are assisting the visitors on site. So as I was saying, these documents today are not, all of them are not stored in ideal condition, and it was very important for us to take care of that. And this is when we started to work on this Vanishing Treasures project. And for that project, we identified several objectives that were really important for us. At first, we decided to concentrate on identify the collection, which means to go on site and to proceed to a complete inventory and detail to know exactly what we have on site, what is the quantity of document, what type of documents we have, what condition they are. So it was really a detailed inventory to proceed. Then the next step after that will be to protect the collection. It was really important for us to make sure that the documents were preserved in adequate supplies with adequate box. They were stored in adequate rooms. It was really important for us that everything will stay safe. And the third objective, which kind of goes with the first one, but it's kind of the most important for us, is that we needed to provide access to the documents for ABMC staff and also to the public. It was really important for us that our colleagues from Brookwood American Cemetery in the UK will be able to conduct a research on the documents that are stored in the Rhône American Cemetery in France. We needed this kind of unity. We needed, as I was saying, to have all the same tools and to be able to all together work with the same database. And to achieve this objective, this is why we focused on the digitization. That was a really important aspect of the project for us. And in addition to the digitization, we also worked with an OCR system to allow our staff to look through the documents and to be able to conduct some research. For example, if one of our colleagues is looking for the history of the uniform in ABMC, he can just search through the documents every time the word uniform appears, and he can also conduct a research. So that's really important for us. And when we will complete the three objectives and when we will be able to have this project complete, it will give us a lot of opportunity to conduct and participate in a history project, because when you know your collection, when you know what you have on site, then you're able to communicate about it, you're able to highlight them, and it's really important for us to do that. I would say that ABMC started as a commemorative agency. We were created to take care of the cemetery and to tell the story about the battles and the soldier. And then slowly there was an evolution towards an interpretation and an educative program. We built some strong guided tour and some communication with school and teachers. That was really important. And I would say that this project will give us another level into being a cultural structure. With a good knowledge of our collection and a good capacity of communicating about our collection, we will be able to be part of a cultural network. We will be able to create a connection with local cultural institution and to be part of other exhibitions, to create our own ABMC exhibition, but also to loan some documents to other structure. And that's really important to us to be identified as a partnership in a cultural project. And as I said, we have 26 sites and all of them have a lot of documents, and we collection our small department, so this is why we needed some help, and this is when we started to talk with History Associates, and they helped us with this project, and this is why I'm going to let Laura explain you a little more in details how they work with our collections.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Charlotte. So that was, I really appreciate that context on the Vanishing Treasures project, and I know everyone in the audience today does as well. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm coming to you from my home office just outside of Baltimore, Maryland in the United States. And as Emmanuel mentioned in the introductions, I'm the Senior Manager of Business Development at History Associates Incorporated, HAI. And it's just been my extreme honor to be a part of this project on the HAI team since the beginning of our involvement back in 2017. So I'm just really excited to share with all of you today on the phone in this meeting some lessons learned, some lessons that we've learned so far since this is a project in progress about how to really responsibly and efficiently plan and implement historical collections digitization. So that's what I'll be sharing with you all today. See if I can, great, it's working. All right, so you heard from Charlotte about the challenges and the visions for our project. As mentioned, really, we are charged with identifying, protecting, and providing access through digitization to more than 250,000 at-risk operational and historical records. You saw some of those images that Charlotte shared with us from the sites and the current collection storage. So, you know, these records, you heard about the importance of them to the ABMC, to the history, and also to the cultural heritage community more broadly. And so, you know, the question was, you know, how can you develop and how can you implement a project of this size, you know, across up to 26 sites around the world? How do you develop and implement a project like that consistently and successfully at such a large scale? So we developed a multi-step solution to help solve that challenge. We developed this solution certainly in collaboration with ABMC, and also based on a number of other similar projects that HAI worked on with other clients, especially within the federal government, within agencies such as the National Park Service, and also through our work with private and public university collections and archives. So, you know, you heard us talk about identification, protection, and providing access to these historical records. So to identify the historical materials that would be part of the project and the steps to take with them, we conduct a survey at each of the ABMC sites. In order to then protect the materials, we conduct organization and preservation of the original analog content. And then in order to provide access to those originals, we catalog the records in the selected cataloging system. In this case, it is the museum system, TMS. That is the cataloging system that's used by ABMC. So you catalog those records, and then also to provide access, you digitize the analog records to create digital surrogates. So that's kind of the solution to solving those three challenges as part of this project. So far, to date, we have surveyed 7 collections within ABMC. We've processed, that is organized, rehoused, 5 of those collections and have so far digitized 3 of the collections. So these are the achievements as of right now, as of this month. And so my portion of the webinar is going to really be sharing with you some things we've learned through this process. And so I kind of have framed this around 3 questions. So the first question is, how do you begin a project like this? The second is, what kind of team, personnel, do you need to complete this type of project, and what are the steps in the process to actually getting from identification through to digitization? So first, I wanted to share a bit of the historical timeline with you about sort of the procurement and the startup of this process that ABMC and HAI undertook in collaboration. So here you're seeing just this kind of timeline of the process. We actually are coming up, Charlotte, I can't believe this, on the 4-year anniversary of HAI receiving the request for proposal from ABMC that was received in June of 2017. We submitted our proposal within that month. And then we really got into this period of discussion, right, to come to agreement on the scope of work, to come to agreement on the solution that we've been talking about, that process to accomplish this work, and to really talk about timelines. So that sort of period of clarification from the time we submitted our proposal through to the contract award and really final contract negotiations took about 5 months. You know, then we were awarded the contract. It's a 5-year contract in March of 2018. And then you'll notice here from this last blue box to kind of the maroon colored one that there was then 6 months. We needed that 6 months to really plan how we were going to start the project. You know, we certainly had all of this in the planning phase, but to actually implement that plan, there were a lot of logistics involved between the contract award and kicking off the project. The other thing is that we decided as a group that we wanted to have the on-site kickoff meeting in parallel with the first survey site visit. So the first survey was done at Suresnes outside of Paris, and of course our kickoff meeting was going to be held in Paris at the ABMC Overseas Operations Office. So we kind of had to coordinate some, you know, across the ABMC contracting and headquarters team, as well as the ABMC site team, and then of course, you know, there were a number of us involved from the HAI side, so just coordinating all of those logistics took some time. So, you know, really from the start of the issuance of the RFP through the kickoff meeting, it really took about 16 months. And the reason I mention this is that, you know, for a project of this size and scale, it's just really important to allow enough time to plan, to coordinate, to really finalize the scope, the resources required, not just pricing if you're going to outsource this work, but also supplies, and just to really allow sufficient time to plan to get started on a project of this nature. Also, I can only speak from the HAI perspective. I can only imagine, and you heard some of this from Charlotte, I can only imagine the time and the dedication that was put in by Charlotte and other of her colleagues at ABMC before HAI even learned of the project. And so I just really want to applaud ABMC on their continued commitment to this project now 4 years after the RFP was issued. So who do you need to support a project like this? So it's very important to have a range of specialists at the ready for a historical collections digitization project of this nature. So that involves folks like myself who really specialize in identifying needs on a project and developing the strategic and the tactical plans to make that happen, to achieve those goals. You also need basically the boots on the ground, implementers, the technical experts. So that includes archivists, museum specialists, curators, conservators, and of course the digitization experts to really work on a project of this nature that involves preservation, cataloging, and digitization. And then of course with any large project, you also need really strong contract and program management teams to guide the administration, the funding, and the work review and approval. And this is on both sides, you know, speaking from the perspective of an outsider, of a contractor, you know, we have a very deep administrative team that supports this project and the contract management, and I know that ABMC does as well. And then finally, you know, I just want to emphasize again that it's really critical to have this multidisciplinary team of technical experts, so both the implementers and the managers. And on this slide, you'll see some of our team members both working on the collections at ABMC sites, and then also enjoying some of the fine dining in Paris, as well as visiting some historic sites in Tunisia. So those are just some images that I included of our team on the ground. So what are the steps in the process, in the solution we discussed? I'm going to just kind of discuss these steps kind of at a high level. Certainly there's a lot of detail. There could be entire webinars on each step. So this will be kind of a high level review. But, you know, my mantra is that you should really plan before you start scanning. So a project like this, a historical collections digitization project, really presents an opportunity to understand, to preserve, and to catalog your materials before they are digitized. So there's vital work to do in this process. So let's take a look at those steps in a little bit more detail. So as I mentioned, we begin with a survey of the historical collections material at each site. So I've listed here some crucial information that's gathered during those survey site visits. The first of which is to just capture basic information about the collections and the record groups. So that includes titles of those collections, if there's existing intellectual information in terms of accession or catalog numbers, the date range of the materials, and then also capturing descriptive information kind of at an aggregate level. We usually do this at a box or a drawer level, and you're recording the types of documents that are in that box or drawer, the subject matter, whether or not there's existing arrangement, if the materials are organized already in some way, and then also capturing information about the general condition of the materials so that you can plan ahead for the next steps. It's also important to evaluate whether or not there is sensitive or copyright protected information in the collection, because that may require additional review within your organization about intellectual property considerations for the materials. And then finally, in our surveys, we always grab and capture as much information as possible. So things to consider documenting might be if there are similar materials stored at other facilities that should be considered as part of the survey and the analysis for these collections. If there's special format materials such as AV materials or perhaps floppy disks, you'll want to capture that information, so again, so that you can plan ahead for that. And then whether or not there are very fragile or brittle or acidic items that may require special care, and also conservation treatment concerns. You know, are there really severe issues within the collections that may require repair or may require some type of conservation treatment and mitigation? We do oftentimes include a conservator as part of the survey team, because for that very specific specialized work, it's really important early on to plan whether or not there might be conservation services needed, because it will have a significant impact on budget and timeline. So we often bring a conservator, which is a very specialized area of expertise, to analyze the materials if we've heard from ABMC in advance that there may be some very special cases or a lot of treatment required. So the survey process actually has a second slide, because there's so much to do at this initial stage. This is your chance to really gather that information. So the second piece of the site survey is the creation of a processing plan for each collection. Our processing plans can consist of 4 components. The first is a cataloging plan, where you're capturing information about how you will catalog the collections. That includes creating initial hierarchies, your series, your sub-series levels, how those materials should be organized, any kind of data standards for when you're actually going to be entering your metadata into the cataloging system itself, and then any other system workflows that you should consider when actually doing the cataloging work in your selected system. So the cataloging plan really focuses on standardizing that cataloging process. The rehousing plan then includes preservation activities, such as whether or not, how you're going to rehouse materials, whether you're going to use photograph sleeves, for example, just really outlines all of the types of preservation activities that should be taken on the collection now that you have surveyed and understood those considerations, and whether or not there's any extraordinary conservation methods or measures needed. If there are, then there's a third component, which is the conservation plan. Again, identifying any kind of specialized conservation treatments, such as perhaps mending of fragile paper. That's a common conservation technique. So the conservation plan will just really outline those specific steps. And then finally, the processing plan includes administrative information about the collections, such as their name, the volume of materials, and the locations where the materials are located at the site. So this processing plan, it's really an overall guide to the work ahead, to the organization and preservation work, to the cataloging work that is to come as part of this life cycle. So then you take your processing plan and you implement it. So that is, you begin to organize and preserve the materials within the collection. This is known as processing within the archives community. And so the process involves arranging materials within boxes according to that hierarchy, that series, sub-series structure that was developed and approved in the processing plan. We identify material that could be weeded from the collection because it either does not have a relevant historical value, or in some cases there may be a records retention policy and the records have reached their retention and no longer need to be kept by the organization. We always use this step as an opportunity to set aside those types of records that do not need to be a part of the collection anymore. And then in our case, always have our clients review those set-aside materials for disposition. So we also then will rehouse the materials according to that rehousing plan in the processing plan. So again, arranging materials within folders, labeling those folders a certain way with certain data standards, putting photographs into mylar sleeves, removing fasteners, all of that type of hands-on rehousing work to ensure that the collections are well protected for the long term from any kind of environmental impacts. Then during our organization and preservation process, we actually write the digitization plans while we are processing. During this processing step, we are really getting to know the materials within each collection in great detail. Oops, sorry, skipped there. We're really getting to know the collections in great detail at this point. And so this is a great time to develop your digitization plan. It will include scanning specifications. This is very technical detail, workflows, how the digitization process will work, rules for scanning. So for example, we write very specific rules in our digitization plans that say things such as, if you see handwritten information on the back of a photograph, please capture that in a certain metadata field. And then also the digitization plan contains file naming conventions, so standardized formats for actually creating the file names for the digital files when they are scanned. So this digitization plan really becomes the roadmap for the digitization work that is to come. And again, we do that during this step because this is when we are very closely working with the collections. The next step then is cataloging. I will say sometimes we will catalog after we've processed, after we've organized and preserved. Other times we'll do the cataloging simultaneously with that step. It just kind of depends on the size of the collection, what timelines are in play, and also just kind of the workflow preferences of your team, whether or not sometimes some folks prefer to actually do the metadata entry while they're working with the materials. Others would prefer to organize those collections ahead of time and then catalog them after. Either way, you're going to be cataloging these items, these folders, these boxes in your selected system. Follow the cataloging standards that are already in the manual that was created during the processing plan development, and record that metadata. Again, I mentioned, it could be at the box, the folder, or the item level, depending on what your organization has decided in your plan. And then really, that data entry process does take some time. It's also important to conduct quality control of your cataloging data to make sure you're identifying any gaps in that information, because this is a human-led process. There's always, the chance that something may be missed. So do build in sufficient time for that quality control after the initial cataloging work is done. So these first 3 steps then have really, sorry, the slide's not advancing. There we go. So these first 3 steps have really prepared you now. You're ready to digitize, to scan the collections. The digitization plan that has been developed will serve as a roadmap for the scanning team. The collection now is prepared for digitization during processing because of a lot of that preparation that the team did already. It really expedites the scanning process because things are organized, the fasteners are removed, that type of thing. And then you have your catalog records in place that you can then ingest the digital files after they're digitized and associate those files with your catalog records at the appropriate metadata level. So now that we've reached that digitization step in sort of this life cycle of the process, I'm going to turn it over to Emmanuel, who's going to discuss scanning in multiple formats as part of our Vanishing Treasures project.
Thank you, Laura. Just before starting, there is one question from Adriana regarding your presentation. Does the digitization plan include the whole collection or select digitization? If select, who made the selections?
That's a really great question. Thank you so much for that. It kind of depends on the situation. The digitization plan is very scalable depending on your goals and missions. So in the case of the project with ABMC, the digitization plan is for each entire collection. However, we have worked with many organizations who there may be a specific purpose for digitization, a specific sharing purpose, for example. We've worked with a lot of organizations who are interested in selectively digitizing content to share in an exhibit around a particular event, for example. And so in that case then, it just kind of depends on what your focus is. With ABMC, it's complete preservation and digitization of the complete collections at each site. For other clients, it may be a specific focus area. And in that case, we will oftentimes work with the client in collaboration to develop the digitization criteria, depending on whatever the intended outcome is of that initiative.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Other questions? Which archival metadata standard did you use?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Which archival metadata standard did you use?
Yes, so we used DAX, describing archives of content standard for this project, as well as some other guidance and metadata, specific metadata requested by ABMC. But yes, DAX was our metadata standard.
Okay, that's all for the moment. That was a question from Alan. So we're going to move on and going to activate my webcam so that you would see me. It's easier. So here we're going to talk about digitization formats, and digitization is slightly different from the archivist point of view. How so? Because when we study the document, we can find multiple format documents. Laura didn't show you the documents that were prepared. They are here. They are still in our warehouses. But before accepting any mission, we want to understand the basis of the project. So we want to see the documents. We want to have access to the inventory files that were provided by HAI and be able to see what is in the collection, because our responses, our answers in terms of quotes, in terms of processes are going to be completely different from one collection to another. So we want to have access to documents to see state conditions of the documents, how we can manipulate them, the opening degrees. Is it flat or is it only restricted opening, 80 degrees or 120 or 180? Sizes as well is quite important for us because we're going to have to involve different kind of scanners inside this project. So here, for example, multiple format documents are present in those boxes. In one single box, you can find bound documents, unbound documents, photographs, negatives, and oversized documents as well. In terms of nature of the document, it's going to have some impact on the kind of paper that we use at the time. Is it really fragile? Is it onion papers? So in those documents, you were able to find, as Charlotte was saying at the beginning, correspondences, reports, newspaper clippings, bound journals and magazines, purchase orders and receipts, and so on. So a great variety of documents, what we call bundle documents. Here you can see an example of some of the elements composing the regular size documents. Here negatives, here some internal press reviews, here some photographs that you can see. They have been prepared very carefully by HAI. Thanks again for the great work. Really, you did a great job. We haven't seen that good a job for so long, really. But you can see here that, for example, for the photographs, you have a lot of manipulations because they are inserted into a single plastic folder. So you have to extract them and to take a picture and replace them inside this plastic folder. And you can see here on the right, all register. There are restricted opening, or at least you have to be careful when you open it and when you digitize that. So it's going to condition the way we are going to prepare the digitization. Collections also was composed of other size documents. All kinds of maps, as you can see there, rolled maps, but also flat maps or even folded maps. So again, a lot of manipulation. We have to be very cautious on that. Other size photographs also that were mounted on linen backing, so you have to be careful as well and to use specific backings on the scanners. And also traces of inscriptions carved on graves. You're going to see that on the next slide. In terms of sizes, most of the collections were around 35 by 47 inches, but also up to the A00 format. That's why, again, it was precious for us to identify really the collections, even if they were described also in the inventory files. But all the inventory files do not tell everything about the document. You need to see it for yourself as well. In regards with this first part of the collection, so it's a small project in regards with the number of images to be produced. There was around 30,000 images to be produced. But when we look at it on the digitization point of view, it's quite complex, but also captivating one in regards with the great variety of documents, its content as well, and also the great competence that was needed from our operators and our project managers as well. Here you can see some examples of maps of the buildings, but also maps of the territory as well, coming from the American Monument, American Cemetery here. But also, I was saying, engraving. So this is coming from some of some soldiers that were being engraved on paper. And they want to keep track as well of that, because you can find the numbers. Here's the name, North Carolina, when he died and so on. So this one is coming from the Second World War, of course. Collections analyzed, as I was saying, also in terms of state conditions. Documents were generally and are generally in good conditions, but sometimes in lesser good conditions, as you can see here. So we need to anticipate the way we're going to produce them and to see with the client, what should we do? Should we get rid of the small part on top of it for the digitization phase, or include them, or make maybe two pictures, one of the document with the different parts, another one with the separate part as well on the side. So always kind of having to decide on specific occasions what to do, because there is always exceptions. Even if there is no problem in digitization of those kind of documents, because our operators are really used to manipulate documents in bad condition. We do digital manuscript for the 16th century or whatever, so there's no problem with that. But it's just more in the process that needed to be implemented in regard with this collection. So it's document specific, as I was saying previously, great variety of papers, onion paper, glossy cover from magazines. So we had to be careful that we would administer the proper amendments to the image. It's being done automatically with scanners when you parameter them beforehand, because glossy cover is going to give much more light when there is some light coming from the sides. So it's again a way to prepare the digitization phase, to note that there is some glossy covers, because you are going to use one specific scanner instead of another. Photographs in individual plastic sleeves, manipulation, of course, but also big maps, oversized maps, for example, that are being folded or also in tubes and so on. So you need to be able to prepare the digitization workshops. You have big tables next to the scanner for the AB00, for example. So you need to prepare in advance everything and to organize the way you're going to dispatch the different documents at various stages of the project in various places in the digitization workshop, which I'm going to show you quite briefly. But definitely with the analysis of this project and the document at hand, but also the recommendation of HAI and the wishes from ABMC that it had to be 100% manual digitization necessary. Scanning parameters were defined by ABMC and HAI, as Laura told us previously. So it was mostly 300 PPI resolution, because here there is the concern of putting them online, but also since there's going to be 26 sites to be digitized and to be added to the software, they needed to have a proper resolution. You need to have a stable exhibition also in the software in terms of download and all those things, but also in terms of backup, because you have always the master file, the uncompressed TIFF, plus also the consultation files. So if you do master file in 300 PPI or in 600, it's not going to be the same business in terms of hosting. And your IT department is going to knock on your door saying, well, what did you do with that? Because 600 PPI for this kind of document, there is no point really. So you need to address both those things, financial issues, IT issues, in order to decide whether you're going to have 300 or 600 PPI. But for example, HAI and ABMC asked for 400 PPI for photographs. So it was, of course, in color. Automatic OCR treatment was applied in comparison with manual indexing or manual segmentation that might be added to it, but it's going to add an additional cost to it. And this was a discussion we had also with ABMC, HAI at one step of the project. And for the time being, we're staying with the automatic OCR, but we could decide for other particular projects or specific documents to do manual indexing, for example, of manuscript documents. So we were going to produce a TIFF, but also PDF or consultation file for integration into the TMS software for ABMC. But then also it was our role as a digitization expert to make recommendations, especially in regard with the collection of negatives that were also included into the documents to be digitized. For us, there was no point really in digitize them in 300 or 400 PPI, because there wouldn't be any positive effect and you wouldn't see anything. So that's why we recommended to have those documents, those negatives, digitized in at least 2,400 PPI. Adding also JPEG as an extra format for future use. So coming next to the PDF, also an additional format that might be suitable. So this first project as well is a test also for ABMC and HAI and for ourselves as well, to identify what are the best practices and to try for the next step, for the next project, to update the way we are preparing the documents, the way we are digitizing the documents and quality controlling them and so on. In order to do so, we have also to dedicate prepared scanning procedures to be observed, because as you're going to see here, in one single folder, physical folder, you have bound documents, unbound documents, handwritten letters, photographs, magazine. You can see here, for example, that there is an envelope here and a document inside. Of course, we're not going to digitize the envelope because we were not asked to do so, but we are going to digitize only the letter that is inside. So there's a lot of guidances to be given, one, to the digitization operators, and two, to the project managers and the quality control managers as well. As a basis, we define that documents must be imaged page by page, not spread by spread, meaning two pages for one image. But on the other hand, for folded brochures, for example, they must be digitized as two unfolded documents. So one and two on a second view. So in terms of threefold brochure, it would be 2 images instead of 6. So once again, we have to be really cautious. We're really precautionate about the way we digitize. And when you digitize something like 300 pages per hour for 6 or 7 hours or more, you need to be really cautious about that. And again, also in one specific folder, one specific file, elements were to be digitized in 300 ppi, other in 400 ppi, and negatives in 2400. Here we had to indicate in one specific folder in the inventory file for our purposes that there were negatives to be digitized apart in our iconographic studio in this folder and that folder. So we had to anticipate that as well. No scanning of archival enclosures or folders, plus also no blank sites needed to be scanned in order to gain in terms of cost as well, in terms of effectiveness. And removal of documents from paper envelopes, so to take sand out of the envelope and back again, paper folders or plastic sleeves for scanning, then replace them as it was previously. So all of this, when we analyzed the documents and when we saw them, the way they were being held and prepared, it was a completely different project from seeing it only with the Excel inventory files, because we knew that there was a lot of manipulation to be done during scanning, but also coming from the project managers, greater attention. As you can see here, this is one of the production facilities we have. We have 4 permanent ones, plus also institute project management project workshops. Here it's our Bordeaux office in France. Here you can see that in one single place we can manage all kinds of dimensions, formats in terms of documents. So as you can see here in front, it's another project, not the ABMC, but it's the oversized documents going up to the A00 format, plus also in the background many different kind of scanners that are going to be used for this specific project. We must have used, I think, 4 or 5 types of scanners, different scanners, in order to produce that project. Plus also we need the necessary workflow software suite to manage it all in one place. All those images coming from various scanners are going to enter into the same folder in one job, what we say, in the software suite. And we are going to use one single inventory file that is going to be completed, 1 by the production manager, 2 by the project manager, and thirdly by the digitization specialist as well. So for documents up to the A3, A2 format, we're going to use this kind of scanner. So mostly those registered bound documents for like this one, but also unbound documents of large size format, for example. For documents, oversized documents going to the A0 or even A00 documents, we are using this kind of scanner here. So it's not the same way we're going to use scanner. For this one, the specific one on the left, so it's only one digital camera that is taking one single shot of the image of the document. For this one, as you can see here, it's a sliding arm. So it's going to take about a minute 30 to go from left to right or right to left. So as you can understand, knowing exactly what are the sizes, the way they are being prepared, and also the scanners to be used is going to have an impact, a huge impact on the prices per kind of documents to be digitized. Because when it takes here a minute about 30 seconds, we're going to make here 30 pages, for example. So definitely not the same ratio in terms of productivity and then price again. Iconographic studio, so it's a separate place, our dark room, as we say, in our workshop. We are going to use dedicated scanners. It's not really scanners, it's a digital camera, just like FaceOne, Hasselblad, and so on. And so we are going to have also different productivity because we have to take off the photographs or the negatives from their single envelopes and so on. In the end, even a small project in terms of size and number of documents, pages to be digitized is involving, as HAI was saying, a lot of expertise. So it's a full team of specialists dedicated to one single project. The analysis of the project at first by me and the head of production. So we went to the Paris office to see the documents, and we analyzed that and came back to our offices and to make a quote to say, well, this is what is relevant for your project and the way you want to approach it and the goals you want to achieve. And then once the contract was awarded to Arkhênum, we had to put that into place with a project manager, with quality control manager, and also with digitization specialists very much specialized in their field. So, for example, Stephanie, which is here, is quite dedicated to oversized documents. For example, when Simon is more specialized into bound documents of all kinds. When Jennifer is one of our photographers and is working in the photographic studio. But also it involves other departments that are less present, physically present, but remain quite important as well. So logistic team, for example, and the administrative team in order also to have a backup on the administrative point of view for all those elements that are being requested for the management of a project. So here it's finally the end of my part of the presentation dedicated to the digitization part. And maybe you have a question now or a bit later. I can always leave the floor to Charlotte for the final conclusion of this presentation with the Vanishing Treasures next step. Okay. Hold on, Charlotte. I think there is one question. Can you give an estimate of total linear feet across the 26 sites? So it's not for me. It's more for Charlotte and maybe for Laura.
That's a really good question. I would love that. We can have this information. Well, it's interesting. We have various size of collection. We have some sites where we identify 5 to 10 linear feet of collection, and we have other sites where we identify 100. So we have different, as I was saying, different collection and different quantities. So I would say that the average quantity collection would be between 20 and 50 linear feet for one collection. But yeah, we have super small ones and we have really big ones. So yeah, average should be between 20 and 50. I'll go really quick into the conclusion so you have time to share some questions if you want. So thank you both to Emmanuel and Laura for this very interesting presentation of this project. I cannot believe it's been already 4 years since we're working on that, and we have so much more coming, so it's really interesting. So yeah, the first step for us will be to integrate the hierarchy, the inventory, and the digitization of the collection in our TMS, in our database, the museum system. And this tool should be able to be shared with our staff first, and maybe one day with the public, to provide people some information about the collection. So that should be a really big step, and it's one of the most important ones we're working on right now. And then we will be able to also find a way to share it with our sites. And the other step will be to continue the work with other sites. As Laura said, we surveyed 7 sites and we rehoused and inventoried 5 of them. So we have a few more to go. So we are currently working on identifying the next sites we can work with. We have, it depends on, either we have some superintendent calling us and saying, I have my collection, I don't know where to store it, I have an issue with it, can you do something? Either I'm going on site and I identified some interesting collection and I put that on the list. So we have a list that we're working with the History Associates of sites that we will work with in the coming months, hopefully. And that should be the 2 main steps of this project. And as I was saying a little bit earlier, then when we will have an identified collection, we will be able to share it with the rest of the world and to work on a lot of very interesting cultural projects. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
And yeah, you want to conclude?
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Maybe you have more questions. There's a question from Addison. What has been the biggest lesson learned on this project so far for each of you? Maybe ABMC could start first.
Oh, sure. It was, well, I knew that we had a lot of interesting items in the collection, but to see them, to being able to identify them and organize them in a complete hierarchy was really interesting. And I think, well, I think we learned patience. I think we learned that this kind of project takes time, and if you want it to be done well, you need to take the time to put the energy in it, and the results totally worth it.
Okay. Any other questions, maybe?
Emmanuel, if I could just add to what Charlotte said, you know, I think as so many cultural institutions, you know, over the past 16 months, you know, we've been dealing with the pandemic. You know, and you know, I think we would be we'd be remiss to not mention it, but you know, certainly the pandemic had a large impact on the progress on this project, because you know, you really need to be able to be there with the materials themselves. You know, and out of safety protocols, you know, we couldn't be there for a long period of time. But you know, the positive side of that is that I think the downtime that occurred because of the pandemic gave us really a chance to kind of step back, assess where things were, make some improvements, you know, to the process. But like I say, you know, I think it really comes down to a project of this nature. You know, as important as digital work is, because where the purpose of this project is to turn these amazing historical physical assets into digital content, you really still have to be able to be there. So, you know, I think that's just one of the biggest lessons learned, and maybe kind of obvious, but I think the pandemic made it even more apparent. But then also, you know, I think this project has demonstrated sort of the universal nature of archives and best practices around archives. You know, we've been able to collaborate across this team that's been speaking here today. You know, the HAI team in the U.S., the Arkhênum and ABMC headquarters team in Paris, and then at all the various ABMC sites. So it's just been very rewarding, I think, for all of us to be able to kind of have that universality across the world. Really, it's pretty amazing how these collections have brought us all together.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about this project. It really makes a bridge between Europe and the US. So it was something that was really interesting, especially in the context of this archiving conference, which is an association based in the US, but also with extension in Europe. So it makes things even more interesting on both sides of the ocean. So definitely. Thank you, Charlotte and Nora. Any other questions before we close this session? Just for the record, there were 50 participants, so thank you all for your attention. It was great to have so many people there. And you can always, I think, have access to the video, and I'll make sure that you have the presentation forwarded to you per email. Do not hesitate afterwards. If you have any question, you can always contact us, as the three of us. All right? One last chance to ask a question? No? Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Charlotte and Nora, for attending and for participating in such a great way. And see you another time. And then we hope physically this time.
Yeah,
okay?
For sure.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Ooh.